So we're crafting a sentence in the next podcast. And so that sentence should be what gives us the most life, that gives us the most energy, that gives us something that we always want to gravitate towards, right? And so as a result of that, we should look at things that distract us from that. That's what we're taking a break from, the things that eliminate that, right? If we look at our balance of our day, and I even challenge the listeners to say, okay, what in my day gives me energy and what takes away energy? As we craft that statement, that's going to be the key. And if we look at gives me energy, we don't have to motivate ourselves to do it, right? If there's something that we enjoy doing and time passes without us staring at the clock, that's something that gives us energy. And that's going to be closely aligned with our purpose, because that's what we were created for, right?
Hello again, and welcome to ReedFlections, a podcast on life, leadership, and learning. I am Art Calderon. I'm here with Reed Nyffeler. Reed is the CEO of a growing global franchise company. He's a father, he's a husband, he's a son, very active in his community, and is here to share some insights that he has with the rest of us. Now, episodes 1 through 4, we talked about priorities and how priorities should be affixed to your life and the way you do life. But then episodes 5 through 9, we talked about habits, putting some legs, some real action behind these ideas and turning them into habits. Now we're going to talk about beginning to know your purpose. And today's episode, this is going to get a little deep, I think. Universal authentic purpose. Universal authentic purpose. Now, authentic, Reed, that means original or genuine. What does it mean to have a universal authentic purpose for our lives?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, authentic is really what the culture wants, right? We can see a mile away when people are not authentic. That is essentially they're trying to represent something that is not inherently them.
Like social media does.
Like social media does, right? You put up your best day and you put the post on that, and people are like, that's not who that person I know is. And even now, as we look at chatbots, right, they're going to, ChatGPT is going to communicate. And so even as I'm reading stories, I'm saying, is that the real voice of the person, or is this some sort of AI generated voice? And what happens is it creates distance. Inauthenticity creates distance. So when we're saying, and it creates questions. So I'm saying, is that the way the person would write? Is that really their photo? Is that the image that was, digitally corrected for that person? And so that inauthenticity, creates distance, and ultimately, then we don't really have connections, right? And so that's where authenticity is so critical and so valuable. And so if we have an inauthentic purpose, right, and our purpose is not inherently who we are, genuine, original, just like I shouldn't copy your purpose statement and make that mine, or you shouldn't copy mine. It truly should be uniquely designed for each of us. And that's ultimately then what makes it authentic. Yeah. And then ultimately have different strengths, right? My voice isn't quite as deep as yours. And however, I have better humor and jokes. So those are things that I can't have a similar purpose statement as a direct result. Those are just basic elements of that. And so, so that's what we want to have. Each of the listeners that are here, the people that are participating, should have their own unique statement. And so the purpose is for us to help craft that with 3 principles. We talked previously about eternal component to that. Then obviously we have the universal, the one we're talking about now. And then last time we did transcendent, which is beyond you. And so that's where we dive into the universal. And what do we mean by universal? Is we mean that's everywhere, right? So we can be an authentic person at home,
right?
But then we put on that, here's my work hat, and the work needs me to be this person, but it's not authentic to who I am, right? And that's what ultimately creates stress. When we're living a life that is not authentic to who we were designed to be, that's where stress is at. So I see countless people that are highly stressed. They said, Reed, are you stressed? I said, no, because love me or hate me, I am authentic wherever I'm at, right? I am, just as condescending in my personal life as I would be to you, Art.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yes. And I use similar jokes at home that my kids hate just as much as the audience, or you may not like them as well. And then obviously I get the same belly laughs in a social setting with the humor that I leverage. Yeah. So that's why I don't have the stress, because, hey, I don't have to worry about, I'm with work people.
Right.
So I need to be a different person. Or, I'm at home, I better be a different person for my wife or family, or I'm in social activities and they see me as a different person. And if they catch me in a work environment, they're like, that's not the Reed I know. And so that's where authentic comes together. And we want to universally apply that in every area of our life. And I would even say, if you're wondering, where is universal application? It goes back to our priorities. And so when I identified my priorities, just to kind of recap those, because it's important as we craft our statement, I should be authentic in my relationship with God. I should be the same person when I have a relationship with God that I am on the second priority, which is with my family. My family will see, if they see a disparity on my relationship with God and my relationship with a family, they're going to say, which Reed is my dad
Mm.
or my husband? And then the third is at work. So if I see someone that I work with at church or with my family, they're going to say, wait, which one's Reed?
Yeah.
And then the fourth priority for me is fun, right? Or recreation. And again, if I'm playing a sport with someone at work and or someone from church and they say, whoa, he was really coming at me and that's not who I know,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they turn on that different personality, that ultimately creates stress and it creates distance in those areas. And so that's universal. In those four priorities, we should universally be authentic and the same, fulfilling and living out our purpose. And that's what this episode's about.
You talk about the stress that comes from living two different lives. I remember when I was in seminary, and I had a job at this really nice hotel downtown, and I was a bellman, so I'd carry their luggage, up and everything. And there was another seminary student who worked there, and he was almost done with seminary. I was just starting, and nobody liked him. He was rude. He was condescending. Now, I'm sure he wasn't that way at seminary. I didn't have any classes with him or anything. But you're studying for the ministry. You're one way. But when you go to work, he was a different way. And I remember he was graduating. He was leaving seminary. He was going to go get a job somewhere as a pastor. And one of the guys that we work with, one of the young guys, he walked up to him and goes, "Hey, what do they teach over there at seminary?" And I was like, "Well, biblical languages and church history and Old Testament survey." And so he goes, "Well, do they teach you how to be nice?" I was like, "Well, it's kind of assumed." He goes, "Well, what happened to that guy?" I had no answer for that. I had no answer. And now that you say that, I think how hard that must have been for him to be trying to live two lives and that kind of stress. And
Right.
so he did not have a purpose that was universally
No.
applied, right? He just said, "Okay, I'm this way here, I'm this way here." So what's the result of living a life like that?
Yeah, I mean, where your vocation, and ultimately it is that stress, right? And it tears down relationships instead of build them up. And so, I hate, as much as I hate to give you a compliment, Art, I'm going to bring myself to do it. But ultimately, we had a relationship before you worked here,
Yeah.
right? And so we were in a church context as it was before, and then in social context at the same time. And what I recognized is you were authentic in those environments, right? I mean, your jokes were just as bad there as they are here, as at the same time as your banter is just as equivalent, and it never changed that environment. And so that was something that appealed to me as we discussed your opportunity here, because I saw the authenticity everywhere you were. And ultimately, that is sometimes when we're interviewing or hiring people in that same work context, and we only see them as they're sitting putting their best self for that interview for that 20 minutes, they're going to put on their work self
Right.
or the promote self. And then we see them in passing as they walk out the door, right? And we see whatever they may be otherwise doing and saying, okay, now they've taken off the show, they've taken off that outfit, and if we look at another example to that is, I saw this clip of an actor and he was a children's character, right? So he was someone that appealed to children, and then he's just living his daily life, and he's in his 50s at the time. The actor's name doesn't matter. But then ultimately, this kid came up to him and said, "Oh, you're the so-and-so actor." And right then he understood that he got into character for that person because he's a nice person, because he's no longer acting and he's not getting paid to do it now.
Yeah.
He's saying, this is a human that needs a little bit of spirit lifted. And so he went back to a line from a movie that he'd memorized 10 years earlier to be there. Now, having watched that clip, there's authenticity there. It's not this distant actor that may or may not be someone that you just see on the screen and they're really jerks in human life. It's someone that can relate to the kids and the audience that isn't even promoting the movie the person was talking about, and he just happened to be there on his own and representing that as well.
Because his purpose was universal. I'm going to be nice to kids,
Right.
even when I'm not doing that for a living.
Or getting paid to do it.
Yeah.
And that's just who he authentically is, which makes him a great actor.
Right.
Because he's not acting in that environment. He's not representing something that he isn't already doing in his life. And so that's universal application, that you're no longer acting in a movie. You're living that on the street, which makes you an authentic actor for the sake of the audience.
Excellent. Excellent. So now I think I know the answer to this one, but do you ever take a break from pursuing your purpose? Do you ever say, "Okay, let's put that on the shelf for a little bit"? Does that ever happen?
So we're crafting a sentence in the next podcast. And so that sentence should be what gives us the most life. that gives us the most energy, that gives us something that we always want to gravitate towards, right? And so as a result of that, we should look at things that distract us from that. That's what we're taking a break from. The things that eliminate that, right? If we look at our balance of our day, and I even challenge the listeners to say, okay, what in my day gives me energy and what takes away energy? As we craft that statement, that's going to be the key. And if we look at gives me energy, we don't have to motivate ourselves to do it, right? If there's something that we enjoy doing and time passes without us staring at the clock, that's something that gives us energy.
Mhm.
And that's going to be closely aligned with our purpose because that's what we were created for, right? Now, some people's purpose statements would not give me energy,
Yeah.
right? If someone's purpose is to, let's say, children and 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, my wife goes in and serves in this community for 3 and 4-year-olds, and she loves it. She loves their little answers and
Uh-huh.
all these other things and their curiosity and everything else. I'm like, no, I just told you, sit down. How do I sit down? And she's like, oh, let me help you. And let's create a fun game to make you sit down. And she loves that. I'm like, I just told you to sit down. Why can't you sit down? And it doesn't quite work in the third and fourth grade. So that gives her energy, right? Because she loves those kids and they want to give her a hug after they go sit down. They get right back up and hug her because they followed the direction. I'm like, no, just stay seated. And she loves that because the relationship is there. So that's her purpose statement, right? And however, that gives her energy and it takes away my energy.
Right.
And so that's what it would say is I'd take a break from that if it were me, because that's not my purpose. Whereas she would.
So you don't take a break from pursuing your purpose. You take a break from things that are detracting from
That's
your
exactly
purpose.
right. And secondarily, as we look at the second half of these podcast series, really the next 12 or so is really going to be how do we apply that to our lives? And so where in our lives are we seeing things that distract us from our purpose that don't help us accomplish it? And how do we manage our time and energy in order to accomplish that? And so it's critical to define it at this stage, but then also live it afterwards. And then we try to eradicate things in our schedule and lives that don't allow us to fulfill our purpose.
Excellent. All right. If compartmentalizing your purposes in your life and, if that causes so much stress, then why do people do that? Why do they live one life here at home or at work or, it sounds almost criminal, like someone's running, one identification here and one identification here. And that kind of life would just cause me a lot of stress. But why do we still do that?
I think a lot of it is because of our focus. We're focused on people pleasing and living towards expectations. And so in a default life, someone else is giving those as expectations, right? We go to a job and a job description is defined and our boss has expectations. Whereas then we go to a home life and our family, our spouses have expectations and their expectations are defining our day-to-day activities. And then we go to recreation and our friends have expectations. So what our purpose statement does is saying, hey, regardless of your expectations, this is what I expect of myself. This is what I was created for and I expect of myself. And I will live to my expectations of myself everywhere. And instead of people pleasing, I'm living and fulfilling my purpose that will make your expectations secondary to that, right? As a leader, I consistently say things that don't meet the expectations of others. What do I mean by that? So most people want us to say, you're doing a great job at mediocrity. So keep doing that and do less. And that's what they're expecting me to say is affirmation predominantly. You're doing a great job. No matter what it is, I'm going to affirm you, right? I'm going to high five you even if you failed miserably because they feel better in the moment, right? Instead, I say, hey, I am about accountability and performance. So that's going to be my measure. And I don't care if you don't like what I'm saying because I know in the end, if I hold you accountable and you perform, you're going to be happier. Right?
So basically, you're saying it comes down to how you're looking at yourself and judging yourself. If you're always trying to find the affirmation from somebody else,
right,
then whatever situation you're in, you're changing.
Right.
You're trying to affirm whoever's in charge there, whoever's going to give you affirmation. You go to a different place, you change it there to get that affirmation. Whereas if you decide that before you go to those places, who you are, what your identity is, what your purpose is, then regardless of what the circumstances is, that doesn't change.
Right. And so how do you know that you're stuck in that cycle? If you change jobs regularly, it's really the individual. You're saying I'm not happy in the expectations they've established for me. And I think a lot of people, they actually are poor at selecting their jobs because they don't have a clear purpose statement. So they go based on compensation. They go based on proximity or lack of accountability instead of saying, does this fulfill my purpose? So last night I had this guy that wanted me to mentor him and he called me and he was considering leaving the military. And I said, well, why would you want to leave the military? And it was a kind of a contracting role. And he said, well, because I'm not getting fulfilled. However, I said, okay, well, you can get fulfillment or compensation. Which are you going to choose? Because if you're hyper focused on compensation, you're going to have to accept what you have. So, well, actually, you're right. A compensation allows for me the lifestyle that I want. So I said, well, then you're going to have to accept the lifestyle you're in. Otherwise, you need to seek one. They're competing interests. Because if you're looking for the highest paying job, it's usually because it's not fulfilling in most
You
cases.
put up with a lot of stuff
You
because
put
they're
what
giving you a lot of money.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
What
Right.
they call the golden handcuffs.
The
right?
golden
Yeah.
handcuffs, right? I mean, I used to talk to a lot of government contractors, and they gave them separation pay to be overseas as a government contractor in the military, and that's because you're putting up with a lot, and then your
Yeah.
compensation is there. So you know those are difficult decisions to make because you've set up your life that compensation is the predominant driver of your career choices, not your purpose,
Mm.
right? And you see that you mentioned seminary, and a component of that would say, hey, wait a minute, am I really fulfilling my purpose? But I mean, it doesn't compensate me as much as other opportunities with similar skill sets necessary. And so that's where you're competing interests, right? And so then you're constantly seeking out what is not living your purpose, but is fulfilling a competing interest. Title,
Mhm.
pay in a job scenario, proximity, autonomy. Those are the things we're looking at. Well, our purpose doesn't include any of those, right? Our purpose statement shouldn't say, my purpose is to make $1 million a year, right? That's not transcendent, universal, or eternal, right? And so that shouldn't be our purpose statement, but we make jobs decide, we decide our job by that. So once we clarified our purpose statement, then we go to our second category. So let's say family. If you're habitually cycling through relationships, whether that's dating relationships or marriage relationships or otherwise, again, it's because you've not defined your purpose. You're looking for short-term fulfillment, not long-term purpose, opportunity to live out your long-term purpose. I talk to my kids and others, and like, well, these cycle of friends evolve, and some of that is because we're learning. We're learning about ourselves, and we're learning about the environments we thrive in, and sometimes our interests change. Right? I mean, as I continue to age, I as well like to play basketball among other things, but my body doesn't respond the same way.
Amazing, isn't it?
Amazing. I mean, I know my vertical is on the decline. Right?
That's right.
My speed is on the decline now.
Yeah.
I might be a little bit more savvy strategically, but that can't compensate for
Right.
probably a dramatic decline. And so my sports evolve, right? And so as a result, pickleball is a sport that I play a little bit more readily. Why? Because I don't have to run as much, right? And I can play with. It's a little bit more social, and
Yeah.
in fact, and this is maybe. Something that I struggled mightily with, but I'm playing for fun now. I was always that guy that played to win. I wanted to win, and I wasn't going to do that to the detriment of others, but I was putting out there my best. But now I'm like, if I do that, I'm not going to be happy with the outcome every time because I can't compete to the level I want to. So now I'm playing for fun. And so what changes? I play with people that are playing for fun a little bit more than playing for competition on the other side. And so those relationships are naturally going to evolve, but my purpose has not changed, right? I will never do anything to detrimental to fulfilling my purpose, right? I want to be authentic. So in each of those environments, I want to be the same person, regardless of if my aspirations in an athletic sense or in a family sense, or even as our family has changed, we have one child at home and instead of four, which was a long period of our life. So those circumstances change, but my purpose with regard to our family, recreation, or even work has not changed.
Good. Authentic purpose. So authentic purpose needs to be the same wherever you are, wherever you live, your relationships, your work, even your play, and that's something that your circumstances are always going to change, but that authentic purpose should never change, right? It should be something eternal. Very good.
Yeah, and I think a follow-up comment on the authentic, because I think it's critical, is we are afraid to be authentic. Many times
What are we afraid of?
We're afraid to be authentic because, if I'm my true self, will people like me? Right. And I'm different. I think different. Right. I have 4 children, and, they were raised in the same environment. They have the same DNA from both parents, but all 4 of them are entirely different. And so, one thing we really early did is say, hey, don't compare yourselves to your siblings. They are a different person with a different mindset, with a different thought. Right. And it's so natural for us to live this comparative thinking and saying, well, that gets attention from mom and dad or the world. And so I want to be like that. Right? Or that is something that I, struggle with. So I've got to work diligently on something that is not authentic or natural to me. Instead, we should lean into that and have that unique personality and not try to emulate someone else. Right? And so that's not authentic, where we say that person is living the template life that I'm looking for. So I'm going to answer the same way they answer and everything else. Right? And so if we look at this globally, one of the things that, it's been widely publicized is that Kobe Bryant intended to be like Mike. He took that,
Hmm.
there was a big image in
Mm-hmm.
the 80s and 90s, be
Oh
like
yeah.
Mike. And that was the whole message, right? That here's Michael Jordan in his authentic self, and we should want to be like him, right?
Yeah.
And so Kobe Bryant studied literally every video that he could ever get his hands on of every game that Michael Jordan had, and then he emulated and practiced each of those moves. So he saw, here's the best player, so I'm going to do everything that that best player did. And it took him quite some time to recognize, wait a minute, my job is to be the best Kobe, right? Is not to be like somebody else. And even at that time, there was interviews, they're going on the 90s and around that saying, hey, who's the next Michael Jordan?
Uh-huh.
And what people would answer is, well, I'm the first Reed, right? I'm the first person. And so that is a mindset shift to say, I'm not trying to emulate anybody else, even if they're the best athlete at
Yeah.
the time, winning multiple championships. I'm going to be the best me because that's what I was created to do. And I think so many people struggle with being their authentic self because their authentic self hasn't had the success of a Michael Jordan.
Oh, so
And
you don't want to be vulnerable and then get shut down or get rejected or not get the love and the affirmation from people.
yeah, what if my authentic self is not good enough? Right. And what I would say to those types of people would be, hey, you're not there for the other person's gain, right? It goes back to what we said earlier, that if you are always saying that my authentic self won't be good enough for this environment, so I'll pivot who I really am, and then I'll try to live that, and then now we're building stress into our lives. Those are the decisions we make that add countless years of stress. And so I'll even make it super practical and personal in that regard. So, let's say if there's an expectation, and it's clothing, right? So let's say we start a new job. And we're like, well, I need to go get all new clothes for that new job because that's not my authentic self. And so I want to represent day one that I look good. Another example is first day of school, right? Everybody gets first day of school pictures and they got to have this environment. And so, you're dressing as mom wants you to, as your son wants to. And so that's always a transitionary phase. Let's use that, let's settle in on that in a second. Every time my kids have gone through junior high, it's right about junior high. Mom typically picks out their clothing for grade school. Now they go to junior high and they're making greater selections of their clothing, hairstyle, and otherwise, right? And so the question is, okay, are you living to the expectations of mom? Are you making decisions to the expectations of your peers? Or are you going to design, live an authentic life with your own attire? And so this reminds me of one of my cousins. And so they were going through that process and I was sitting at a family dinner and she had two different socks. I was like, your socks didn't match. She's like, no, that's my style.
Oh, it's
And so her style
okay.
was always to have two socks that were similar, I think, brand,
Yeah.
but totally different colors and style. And that was her style. And I was like, that's awesome. That's your authentic self. Whereas me, I'm like, my socks don't match. I got to go home, right?
Yeah.
That's not my authentic
Yeah,
self,
yeah,
but that's
yeah.
her authentic self.
Yeah.
And I think some of those are little subtleties,
Yeah.
right? One of the things that's my authentic self is I like to say things backwards, right? Like we got to get the horse before the cart instead of the cart before the horse, right? People are like, that's backwards. Exactly. That's just for fun. That's what I like to do from an authentic self standpoint. And so those are just little intricacies that are authentic to who we are. Just don't be afraid to be your authentic self, right? If you're in an environment, and here's what you should think in that moment is saying, why am I making the decision I'm making? Am I doing that to people please the audience I'm with?
Mm.
So, and I've used this in a previous podcast, but it's worth bringing up again. I was in a business environment. I've never drank a drop of alcohol my entire life, actually. And so this one person said to me that, if you don't drink alcohol, I can't do business with you. And I said, I am not going to change for you.
That's so petty.
It's
right?
so petty, but that was not about that circumstance, that individual. That was about me.
Right.
Am I going to be who I am? And so I didn't take it as he thinks I should drink. He's saying, will you succumb to my pressure?
Will you compromise who you are for me? And for that, he wasn't going to do business with you.
That's right. And
Wow.
so don't even look at it about alcohol. That's immaterial. It's saying, in what environment will you compromise? And to that degree, if you compromise, you're not your authentic self.
Right.
Because if you're authentic, it's universal, right? So one of the things I do every day is I drive my 11-year-old to school. And as much as energy I put into this, I try to put into those interactions as well. Because otherwise I'm cheating them. I'm not authentic with regard to those interactions. So one of the things we go through is each and every day we read a Bible study, the verse of the day, he reads it, and we talk about it. And so as we talk about it, I'm saying, okay, One, he gives me his perspective, right? He's 11 years old, so his perspective isn't as possibly developed as mine. And so then I let him speak to it and it formulates his thoughts around it. And then the second thing that happens is I give my perspective, just like I do in any conversation in work. Someone has an idea, they give me their perspective, and then I provide an alternative perspective. And so that to me is being authentic in that relationship, regardless of the content, is that I am there not just to direct my children, but to develop them, much like I have to do at work or in any other setting, right? Is I'm developing instead of just directing.
Authenticity. Very good. Well, Reed, once again, thank you very much for sharing your time and your experience with our listeners. Thank you, listeners. Please leave a comment and subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. Next time, we're going to craft our own purpose statement. So there is some homework crafting your own purpose statement. I think this is going to be really good for a lot of us. Until then, I'm Art Calderon. Be purposeful.
And I get to make a statement, the last statement. So for those of you who live in a series of stress, everywhere you turn, you're highly stressed. That is generally speaking because one, you haven't crafted that statement that we talked about. And number two, you're not living your authentic life. So this next episode is supremely critical because you will live in a constant state of stress the rest of your life if you have not defined who you were genuinely, authentically created to be. And then ultimately, your discipline to living that purpose is the next step. So I look forward to having you join us next time where you can take that stress, focus that onto a statement, and then live your authentic life.